I never told my son about my $40 monthly salary. To him, I was just Mom, the woman who left early for the office. Came home tired, and made dinner with whatever was left in the fridge. He thought I was just another office worker. Maybe a secretary, maybe someone ordinary, and I never corrected him. Why would I? I grew up in an era where dignity didn't need an audience. Where silence held more weight than bragging. For almost 20 years, I'd been a senior executive at a multinational corporation, signing million-dollar contracts, making decisions that affected thousands of people. But at home, I lived simply. A small apartment, an old leather handbag, clothes from discount stores. I didn't need to impress anyone. I was rich in silence because true power doesn't shout, it observes. That Tuesday afternoon, Marcus called. His voice sounded nervous, hesitant. Mom, I need a favor. Samantha's parents are visiting from out of town. It's their first time here. We're having dinner with them on Saturday night at this restaurant downtown. Please come. Something in his tone made me uneasy. It wasn't the voice of a son inviting his mother, it was the voice of a man afraid I might embarrass him. Do they know anything about me? I asked calmly. Silence. Then Marcus stammered. I told them you work in an office. That you live alone. That you're simple. There it was. That word, simple. As if my entire life could be reduced to one adjective. As if simplicity were something to apologize for. I took a long breath. All right, Marcus, I'll be there. When I hung up, I looked around my living room, the old but comfortable furniture. Plain walls, the modest TV, nothing that would impress anyone. But I wasn't angry. No, I was curious. If my son thought of me as poor, and his wife's parents were coming ready to judge me, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would play the part. The broke, naive, ordinary woman. I wanted to see their true faces. I wanted to confirm what my instincts had been whispering for months, that the Grants were the kind of people who measured human worth by their bank accounts. And my instincts rarely failed me. Saturday came faster than I expected. I chose the plainest outfit I owned, a faded gray dress. Slightly wrinkled, shapeless, old shoes, no jewelry, no makeup. I tied my hair back into a loose ponytail and carried a worn-out canvas tote. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman life had supposedly broken. Forgettable, perfect. The taxi ride felt longer than it was. The city lights passed by like quiet witnesses. I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. Sadness, because I still hoped I was wrong. Anticipation, because a part of me knew I wasn't. When we arrived, the restaurant stood like a palace, tall glass doors, golden lights, and a doorman wearing white gloves. One of those places where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you don't belong there. I paid the driver, stepped out, and took a deep breath before walking in. Marcus was already standing near the long window table. He looked handsome in a navy suit, but his expression was tight, nervous. Beside him stood Samantha, my daughter-in-law, flawless as always. Wearing a cream-colored dress and high heels. Her blonde hair perfectly straight. Her eyes flicked toward me for only a second before she looked away. And then I saw them, Veronica and Franklin Grant. Samantha's parents. They sat like royalty on their thrones. Veronica wore an emerald green dress covered in sequins. Diamonds on her wrists and neck. Her dark hair was pinned in an elegant bun. Franklin wore a tailored gray suit. A gold watch the size of a coin. And that kind of polite smile that hides arrogance. I walked toward them slowly. Marcus saw me first, and I caught that flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Mom, you made it, he said. His voice trembled slightly. Of course, sweetheart, I replied softly, with the timid smile of a woman unaccustomed to luxury places. Samantha kissed my cheek lightly, cold, mechanical. It's nice to see you, mother-in-law. Her tone said the opposite. She turned to her parents. Mom, Dad, this is Marcus's mother, Evelyn. Veronica looked me up and down. Her eyes paused at my worn shoes, my wrinkled dress, the old tote. Then she extended her hand, cold and quick. A pleasure, she said. Likewise, I murmured. No one offered to pull my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. I sat quietly at the far end of the table. The spot that screamed outsider. A waiter handed us heavy menus written in French. I opened mine, pretending to struggle. Veronica noticed. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked with that sweet, venomous smile. "Yes, please," I said timidly. "I'm not sure what these words mean." She sighed dramatically and turned to the waiter. "Something simple for her," she said. "Nothing too expensive." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Franklin nodded approvingly. Marcus looked away. Samantha busied herself with her napkin. I simply watched. Veronica started small talk, about their long flight. About the $1 a night hotel. About the luxury car they'd rented. Then, of course, she mentioned shopping. "We bought a few things, nothing major. Just a few thousand here and there." She glanced at me, waiting for admiration. "How nice," I replied softly. She smiled wider. "You know, Evelyn, we've always been smart with money. We have properties in 3 countries. Franklin runs several businesses, and I manage our investments." Then came the question, the inevitable sting. "And what do you do exactly?" "I work in an office," I said, lowering my gaze. "Mostly paperwork, filing, simple things." "Ah," Veronica said, nodding, her tone dripping with condescension. "Administrative work. That's fine. Honest work. All jobs are dignified." I smiled faintly. Of course. The food arrived, tiny portions on giant plates. Veronica cut into her steak delicately. "This one costs $80, she said. "But it's worth it. You can't eat just anything." I nodded. "You're right." Then she leaned in. "Evelyn, do you live alone?" "Yes," I said. "In a small apartment." Her lips curved into a pitying smile. "That must be hard, living alone at your age without much support. Does your salary cover everything?" The trap had been set. "I manage," I said calmly. "I don't need much." "How brave," she said. "Truly, some people just accept their limitations gracefully. I admire that." Her words were sugar-coated poison. I stayed silent, watching, calculating, because I knew I wasn't just at dinner. I was conducting an experiment. And the results were already clear. Veronica Grant cut into her steak with delicate precision, the diamond on her finger catching the light like a tiny blade. "This one costs $80, she said casually, glancing at me as if testing whether I'd flinch. "But it's worth every penny. You can't just eat anything when you know quality, right?" I nodded with the soft smile of someone too polite to challenge her. "Of course, you're right." She smiled, pleased. "Exactly. Franklin and I always say, quality defines class." Across the table, my son Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked between us, the tension invisible to him yet heavy enough to fill the space. Then Veronica leaned forward, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Evelyn, you said you live alone, didn't you?" "Yes," I said, "in a small apartment downtown." "Oh, that must be hard," she murmured, her expression tightening into an insincere pout. "At your age, without much family support. And your salary, does it cover everything?" "I manage," I said. "I don't need much." She sighed dramatically. "You're so brave, truly. I admire women like you who struggle alone. Of course, one always wishes to give their children more. To give them a better start, but everyone does what they can." There it was, the blow hidden inside sugar. Marcus looked down at his plate, his jaw tight. Samantha stayed silent, pretending to focus on her food. I simply smiled. "Yes," I said quietly. "Everyone gives what they can." Veronica took another sip of her expensive red wine, swirling it elegantly in her glass. "Franklin and I have always made sure Samantha had the best. The best schools, private tutors, international travel. We even helped them with the down payment on the house. $40,000. And of course, the honeymoon in Europe. 3 weeks. 15,000 more." I nodded slowly. "That's generous." She beamed, mistaking my calm for admiration. "When you love your children, you don't hold back." I tilted my head slightly. "That's true. Love doesn't count bills." Veronica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she quickly composed herself. "And you, Evelyn," she said sweetly, "were you able to help Marcus when he got married?" "Not much," I said. A small gift. Nothing compared to what you did. Her voice turned syrupy. Oh, how sweet. Every little bit counts. The intention is what matters. Beneath the table, my fingers curled tightly together. Hidden from view, her words weren't about generosity, they were about hierarchy. Veronica and Franklin weren't talking to me, they were talking down to me. I could see the satisfaction in their eyes as they imagined themselves benevolent benefactors to the poor, struggling mother of their son-in-law. It was fascinating to watch. They were so used to power. They didn't even realize when they were being observed. I let the silence linger before I asked, softly, "So, how are your businesses, Franklin?" He straightened, proud to have the spotlight. "Doing well," he said. "We just acquired another property in Palm Springs. Real estate, stocks, global ventures, you name it. It takes a sharp mind to stay ahead these days." "Of course," I said. "Managing wealth must be very demanding." He gave me a tight smile. "Well, it's what separates the winners from the rest." Winners. I let that word hang in the air. Veronica turned back to me. "And you, Evelyn, do you have any hobbies? Things you enjoy when you're not working?" "I cook, walk in the park, read when I can," I said. "How lovely," she said with mock delight. "Simple things have their charm. Too, of course. One always aspires to see more of the world, right? To grow culturally, but not everyone has that privilege." Her words were so polished they almost sparkled. They were also venom. The waiter returned with dessert, a masterpiece of edible art. Veronica pointed at hers with satisfaction. "This one has edible gold. $30 for a single piece. But it's divine. Franklin, you must taste this." She looked at me expectantly. "You should try something simple. Evelyn, perhaps the apple tart. It's easier." I nodded again, smiling faintly. "That sounds perfect." Inside, the quiet fire in my chest had begun to grow. It wasn't anger, it was the sharp, cold awareness that I was watching a performance of arrogance dressed as refinement. Then, with a tone that pretended to be casual, Veronica placed her fork down and folded her manicured hands. "Since we're all here, I think it's the perfect time to talk about something important." Marcus stiffened. "Mom, maybe." "Let me finish, sweetheart," she said smoothly. "It's just family talk." She turned to me. "Evelyn, we respect you very much. Raising a child alone must have been difficult. And you clearly did your best. But Marcus is married now. He has responsibilities, and Samantha and he deserve stability." "Stability?" I asked softly. "Yes," she said, smiling like a queen granting mercy. "Financial and emotional stability. Franklin and I have helped them a lot. And we'll continue to, but we also think Marcus shouldn't have unnecessary burdens." Her meaning hit like ice. "Burdens?" I repeated. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Please don't take it the wrong way. Evelyn, we just want to make sure Marcus doesn't feel pressured to take care of you financially. It's not fair to him. And it could affect his marriage. You understand, don't you?" "I understand perfectly," I said. Veronica's eyes brightened. "Good. That's why we wanted to make you an offer. Franklin and I would be happy to help you, a small monthly allowance. Say $500, maybe $700. It would help you live more comfortably, without Marcus having to worry. In exchange, we'd just ask you to respect their space. Not visit too often, not interfere." There it was, the bribe, wrapped in politeness. The table fell silent. Marcus's face turned pale. Samantha's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. I placed my napkin carefully on the table, pretending to think. Then I looked up and said quietly, "That's very generous of you, Veronica. Truly, I just have one question." Veronica smiled. "Of course, anything. How much exactly did you spend on Marcus and Samantha's wedding and honeymoon?" She blinked, caught off guard. "About $55,000 in total." "Why?" I nodded slowly, keeping my voice calm. "So, you invested $55,000 in your daughter's marriage, and now you're offering me $700 a month to disappear from my son's life." The air froze. Franklin shifted uncomfortably. Veronica's smile cracked. "I wouldn't put it that way," she said. But that's exactly what you said, I replied, meeting her gaze. And in that moment, for the first time all night, I saw something flicker in her eyes, uncertainty. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. A calm, knowing smile. Because I had just decided, if they thought I was a poor, desperate woman, I would let them keep thinking that. Until the moment I decided to show them what real wealth looked like. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The clinking of glasses and quiet laughter from other tables filled the silence that had settled around us. I could almost hear Veronica's heartbeat thudding beneath her diamond necklace. Franklin cleared his throat, pretending to look calm, but I could see the flicker of irritation in his jaw. Evelyn, he began, his voice measured, I think you're misunderstanding my wife. We only meant to help. Help, I repeated softly, tasting the word. How thoughtful. I reached for my glass of water, took a sip, and smiled. It's fascinating, though. You helped with the down payment, $40,000. The honeymoon, $15,000. And now, a small allowance of $700 for me to disappear quietly. You're very precise in your generosity. Veronica straightened in her chair, her voice colder now. There's no need to twist our words. Evelyn, we just want what's best for Marcus and Samantha. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes steady on hers. Do you? Or do you want control? Because I'm starting to wonder if what you call generosity is just another form of ownership. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Franklin shifted again, his polite smile fading. Marcus, sitting beside me, looked like a man trapped between two storms. Mom, he whispered, please. Let me finish, Marcus. My tone was calm, even gentle. I've listened all night. I think it's my turn now. The waiter approached timidly. Is everything all right here? We're perfectly fine, I said, without taking my eyes off Veronica. The waiter hesitated, then nodded and left. I placed my napkin down carefully and folded my hands. You know, Veronica, you've spent the entire dinner talking about money, how much things cost, what you've bought, how well you've invested, but you never once asked me how I am, or what makes me happy, or how I raised Marcus on my own. You didn't care about that, did you? Because in your world, people are only as valuable as the numbers in their bank account. Veronica inhaled sharply. That's unfair. No, I said. What's unfair is assuming that a woman who wears old shoes must have no worth. What's unfair is deciding that a person's dignity can be measured in dollars. I saw it in her eyes then, the panic of someone who's losing control of a script they've written. Do you know what I think? I continued. I think you've mistaken quiet for weakness. You've mistaken modesty for poverty. And that's your biggest mistake tonight. Veronica's voice trembled slightly. What exactly are you implying, Evelyn? I smiled. That maybe, just maybe, you should have done your homework before trying to buy me off. Her frown deepened. Franklin looked confused. Marcus froze. Samantha's face went pale. Do you really want to know what I do for a living? I asked softly. Not the version Marcus told you, the simple office worker story. The real one. Veronica crossed her arms. Enlighten us. I nodded slowly. I'm the regional director of operations for Westbridge Global Holdings. I manage 5 countries, oversee thousands of employees, and sign contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My monthly salary is $40,000, not counting bonuses, stocks, and investments. I've held that position for nearly 2 decades. For a moment, no one moved. The table froze in complete, stunned silence. Marcus blinked, his mouth slightly open. Mom, 40,000? A month? I nodded. That's right. Samantha's fork slipped from her hand, hitting the table with a soft metallic sound. Veronica stared at me as if I had spoken another language. That's impossible, she said finally. If you earned that much, we would know. Marcus would know. I smiled faintly. Why would he? I never talked about my job. I live simply. I save. I invest. I don't spend my life proving anything to anyone. Franklin let out a skeptical laugh. You expect us to believe you make that kind of money, dressed like that? Yes, I said, because real wealth doesn't need validation. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And it shows itself not in what you wear, but in how you stand when others try to belittle you. Veronica looked pale now, her confidence draining. If that's true, why pretend to be poor? Why humiliate us like this? I leaned back, my tone calm and cutting. I didn't humiliate you, Veronica. You did that yourselves. I simply gave you the chance to show who you are, and you did. Beautifully. Samantha's voice came out trembling. Mother, please stop. Veronica ignored her. You lied to us, she said, her voice rising. You deceived everyone here. I tilted my head slightly. Did I? Or did I just hold up a mirror? Franklin exhaled, rubbing his temples. This is ridiculous. Evelyn, if you make that much money, prove it. I reached into my canvas tote. The same one Veronica had eyed with disdain when I arrived. Slowly, I pulled out a black, platinum-edged credit card and placed it on the table. It gleamed faintly under the restaurant lights. This, I said, is my corporate card. No limit. My name is engraved right there. Evelyn Carter. Regional Director, Westbridge Global Holdings. You can call the company on Monday if you want. Veronica stared at the card as if it were something poisonous. I don't need to see that, she said quickly. I know, I replied, because you've already seen enough. Marcus still looked stunned. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? Because, sweetheart, I said gently, you didn't need to know. I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not privilege, to build your own life without thinking that I'd always be there as a safety net. Money changes people. I wasn't going to let it change you. Samantha whispered, almost to herself. Then why live like this? The small apartment, the old clothes? Because peace doesn't come from luxury, I said. It comes from knowing who you are without needing anyone's approval. I looked at Veronica again. That's something you could learn. If you ever stop measuring people by their dinner bills. Her mouth tightened, her eyes glistening with humiliated rage. You think you're better than us, don't you? No, I said softly. I think I'm free, and that terrifies you. The waiter approached again, holding the check. He looked nervous. Would you like me to split the bill? I smiled. No need. I slid the black card toward him. Put everything on this, and please include a generous tip. Veronica's lips parted. That's not necessary. I insist, I said. Consider it a gift from a broke, naive woman who apparently needed help. The waiter nodded and walked away, leaving the silence thicker than before. Franklin's face had gone pale. Marcus stared at the table, ashamed. Samantha's eyes shimmered with tears. And Veronica Grant, queen of superiority, looked at me with something I had never seen in her eyes before. Fear. The silence at the table was so thick you could cut it with a knife. No one dared to speak as the waiter disappeared with my card. Veronica's eyes darted from me to Franklin. Her face caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. She wasn't used to being the one on the defensive. After a moment, Franklin forced a chuckle that sounded painfully strained. Well, that was quite the performance. Evelyn, you really had us going there. You should have been an actress. I smiled faintly. I'm not performing, Franklin. I just stopped pretending to be small. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a sip of his wine, his hand trembling just slightly. Samantha looked down at her lap, her fingers tightening around her napkin. Marcus kept glancing at me, his expression torn between pride and guilt. A few minutes later, the waiter returned, looking a little pale. Sir, he said, addressing Franklin, I'm very sorry to bother you, but your card was declined. The entire table froze. Franklin blinked. That's impossible. Try it again. The waiter nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Of course. He left, leaving behind an invisible cloud of humiliation that seemed to hover directly over Franklin and Veronica. Veronica's hands were clasped so tightly together her knuckles turned white. There must be some mistake. That card has no limit. I said nothing. I only took a slow sip of water. The waiter returned moments later, clearing his throat. Sir, I'm afraid the system rejected it again. Franklin stood abruptly. That's ridiculous. Call your manager. There's no reason my card should be declined. Franklin, Veronica hissed under her breath. Sit down, but her voice had lost all of its icy composure. He looked around. People were starting to notice. Heads were turning. A few murmurs rippled through the elegant dining room. I watched him with quiet interest. For once, the man who measured his worth in zeros and titles was being measured by silence and eyes. It's probably a temporary block, I said mildly. Happens to the best of us. Maybe the bank's doing a security check. It must be inconvenient. Franklin's jaw twitched. It's a mistake. The waiter glanced at me nervously. Ma'am, your payment went through perfectly. Everything settled. Thank you, I said. Veronica's voice was tight. You paid? That wasn't necessary. I looked at her evenly. Of course it was. You offered me $700 a month to stay out of my son's life. Consider this my first payment in advance. Her face flushed scarlet. You're mocking us. I'm educating you, I replied. There's a difference. Marcus leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom, maybe we should just leave. Not yet, sweetheart. I turned to Veronica, my tone steady but sharp as glass. You wanted to talk about stability, right? About burdens? Let's talk about that. Veronica met my eyes, her mask slipping. You've made your point. Oh, I've barely begun. I leaned forward. You told me tonight that Marcus deserves financial stability. That you and Franklin want to help me by giving me an allowance. But tell me something, Veronica, what happens when your card gets declined? When the money that buys your power suddenly stops working? Who are you then? Her lips parted, but no words came out. That's the problem with people who worship money. I continued. They build their entire identity around it. Take it away for 1 second, and everything collapses. Franklin returned to the table, his phone still in hand. It's a temporary issue with the account. He muttered stiffly. It'll be resolved by morning. I smiled. Of course. But tonight, it's my treat. Please, don't worry about it. The waiter returned with the receipt. I signed it with calm precision and slid it back to him. The heavy silence hung over us again. Samantha finally whispered, Mom, Dad, maybe we should apologize. Veronica shot her a glare so cold it could have frozen fire. For what? For being deceived? I stood slowly, collecting my worn tote bag from the back of the chair. No, Veronica, you weren't deceived. You were revealed. There's a difference between a lie and a lesson. Her voice trembled now, laced with barely controlled rage. You think money makes you better than us? No, I said softly. I think respect does. And that's something you can't buy, no matter how many gold cards you own. Franklin looked at me, his pride visibly cracking. Evelyn, this has gone far enough. Has it? I asked. Because I think we're finally at the honest part. Veronica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. You came here to humiliate us. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I came here to see you. The real you, and I found her. For a moment, the woman who'd spent the entire night boasting about her fortune looked small, fragile even. The room's golden glow made her sequined dress shimmer like armor that had finally begun to crack. Then, quietly, I reached into my tote one more time. This time, I pulled out another card, a heavy, metal one with a matte black finish and a faint platinum edge. I placed it gently on the table. This, I said evenly, is my American Express Centurion. Invitation only. Minimum annual spending requirement, $250,000. I rarely use it, but tonight felt appropriate. Veronica's eyes widened. You? Yes, I said. So, don't worry, I covered everything, including the wine with edible gold. The waiter returned, bowed slightly, and placed the receipt back on the table. Everything has been taken care of. Ms. Carter, thank you for your generosity. I nodded. You're welcome. As the waiter walked away, I turned to Veronica one last time. You wanted to help me live more comfortably? Consider it done, because I can assure you, after tonight, I've never felt more comfortable in my life. Veronica's jaw tightened. You won't get away with this. You've humiliated us in public. I smiled gently. No, Veronica, you did that yourself. I just paid the bill. With that, I picked up my tote, looked at Marcus, and said softly, It's time to go, sweetheart. He stood immediately, his voice trembling with quiet awe. Yes, Mom. Samantha rose slowly, tears glimmering in her eyes. she whispered. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. I met her gaze and nodded. You're not the one who owes me an apology. And with that, I turned toward the exit. The sound of my old shoes against the polished floor echoed through the elegant restaurant like a closing chapter. Behind me, I heard Veronica hiss, "This isn't over." I stopped at the doorway, turned slightly, and said without looking back, "You're right, it's not, because now, every time you see me, you'll remember tonight, you'll remember the woman you called poor, who paid for your dinner." Then I stepped into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered around me, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless, not because I had won, but because I had spoken the truth. And that truth had power. The night air outside the restaurant felt colder than usual, slicing through the noise of the city. Marcus walked beside me, silent, his shoulders tense, his mind clearly running wild. Samantha followed a few steps behind, her heels clattering softly against the pavement. Neither of us said a word until we reached the edge of the parking lot. The glow of the restaurant still reflected faintly on the windows behind us. I could imagine Veronica and Franklin sitting there in stunned silence, the taste of their own arrogance finally settling in. Marcus finally spoke. "Mom, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, sweetheart," I said calmly. "Just promise me you learned something tonight." He let out a slow, shaky breath. "I did. I learned that I've been blind. I let them talk about you like you were." He stopped himself, shame crossing his face. Like I was less. I finished for him, but my tone wasn't angry. "That's all right. I let them believe it. I wanted to see how far they'd go." Samantha spoke softly behind us. "They went too far. I'm so sorry, Evelyn." I turned toward her. Her mascara had smudged, her perfect hair slightly undone. For the first time, she looked human, vulnerable. "You knew who they were, didn't you?" I asked gently. Tears welled in her eyes. "I tried to warn Marcus once. I told him my parents could be judgmental, controlling, but I never thought they'd humiliate you like that." "They didn't humiliate me, Samantha," I said. "They exposed themselves. All I did was watch." She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "You're right. You handled them better than I ever could." I smiled faintly. "That comes with age, and a lifetime of being underestimated." Marcus rubbed his forehead. "I can't believe this. The way they treated you, like you were a burden." "That's because to people like them," I said softly, "value is conditional. Respect has a price tag. And love, well, they confuse it with ownership." Samantha looked away, her voice breaking. "They don't understand people like you. They never will. All they see is what they can buy. And that," I said, "is why they'll never be truly happy." We reached the taxi stand. I called for a cab. The streetlights flickered faintly, and for a moment, everything felt still. Marcus turned to me again, guilt etched in every line of his face. "Mom, I'm sorry for how I acted. For making you feel like you had to hide who you are. For letting them talk down to you." I placed a hand on his cheek. "You don't need to apologize. Marcus, you saw the truth tonight. That's enough." He nodded, his voice cracking. "You shouldn't have had to prove yourself like that." "I didn't," I said with a small smile. "I proved them. There's a difference." The taxi arrived. Marcus opened the door for me. But before I got in, Samantha took a small step forward. "Evelyn," she said hesitantly, "I know you probably hate me right now. But please believe me, I'm not like them. I didn't know they'd say those things. I wanted tonight to go well. I really did." I studied her for a moment. There was sincerity in her eyes. And pain. She was ashamed, not just for her parents, but for herself. "I don't hate you, Samantha," I said, "but I want you to ask yourself something before you sleep tonight. When they were talking to me, mocking me, pitying me, did you feel uncomfortable because they were wrong? Or because you were afraid they might be right?" Her eyes widened, and a tear slid down her cheek. "Both," she whispered. I nodded. "Then you have your answer. You can be better than them. But only if you start seeing people for who they are, not what they have." She nodded silently, wiping her tears. I turned to Marcus. "Take care of your wife. And take care of your heart. Don't let bitterness grow there. You can't fix people like Veronica and Franklin. But you can protect yourself from becoming like them. I will, Mom, he said. I promise. I smiled gently, then stepped into the taxi. The driver glanced back at me through the mirror. Evening, ma'am. Everything all right? I chuckled softly. Better than ever. As the cab pulled away, I saw Marcus and Samantha standing side by side. Framed under the streetlight, two people who had finally seen the world without the filter of money. The ride was quiet. The city passed in flashes of neon and shadow. I looked out the window, my reflection overlapping with the skyline. I thought about what had just happened, the humiliation, the tension, the truth laid bare in front of everyone. Was I cruel? Maybe. Was I honest? Absolutely. And sometimes honesty is the most merciless form of justice. The driver spoke again. Rough night? You could say that. He nodded knowingly. You don't look angry, though. Most people who leave that restaurant look either furious or drunk. You look peaceful. I smiled faintly. That's what truth does, it burns. But it cleanses. He grinned in the rearview mirror. Wise words, ma'am. I leaned back in my seat. My mind finally quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to hide who I was. Not my power, not my story, not my truth. When we reached my apartment, I paid the driver and stepped out into the quiet night. The old building loomed above me, familiar. Safe, mine. I walked up the stairs slowly, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Everything was as it always had been, simple, small, but full of peace, the kind of peace that money can't buy. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and looked around my modest living room. I thought about Veronica's jewels, her sequined dress, her gold-plated arrogance, and for the first time, I felt pity. Because beneath all that shine, she was hollow. I took a deep breath, smiled to myself, and whispered into the quiet room. They thought I was poor. They'll never understand how rich peace feels. The next morning, sunlight spilled softly through the curtains, painting golden lines across my kitchen floor. The kettle hissed quietly as I poured myself a cup of tea. Everything felt still, peaceful, clean. I thought about the night before, the sharp words, the trembling silence, the way Veronica's voice had cracked when her power slipped away. I didn't regret a single thing. Sometimes life demands a mirror, and I had finally held one up. Just as I sat down, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Marcus. Good morning, sweetheart, I answered. His voice came out heavy but steady. Mom, I had to call you. Samantha and I didn't sleep much last night. I sipped my tea slowly. I imagine not. There was a pause. They called us after you left. He said quietly. My in-laws. They were furious. Said you embarrassed them. My mother-in-law even said she'd never forgive you for exposing her. Exposing her? I repeated softly. She should be grateful. I gave her something money can't buy, a chance to see herself honestly. He exhaled a shaky laugh. I told her the same thing. You'd be proud, Mom. I told them if they ever spoke to you like that again, I'd walk out of their lives completely. A wave of warmth bloomed in my chest. Marcus? I mean it, he said. You didn't deserve that. You raised me alone. You worked your whole life. And they treated you like some burden to pay off. I won't let them. Good, I said softly. But don't fight them in anger. Just stand your ground with grace. Anger gives them power. He sighed. I'm learning that, from you. There was another pause. Then he said something that made me sit up straighter. Samantha wants to come talk to you. Alone. She said she needs to apologize properly. I smiled faintly, then let her. After we hung up, I went about my day quietly. I watered the plants on the balcony, folded laundry, organized old photos, ordinary things, but underneath every small motion was a strange calm, the kind that follows a storm that's finally spent itself. By evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Samantha stood there, holding a small bouquet of tulips. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked like someone who'd just seen the foundation of her world crack open. Hi, she said softly. Can I come in? Of course. She stepped inside, glancing around my modest apartment. It's cozy, she murmured. Peaceful. I smiled. That's how I like it. We sat down at the table. She placed the flowers between us like an offering. I owe you an apology. She began. Actually, more than one. You don't owe me anything. Samantha, I said gently, only honesty. Her eyes filled with tears again. Then I'll be honest. I let them talk about you that way because part of me believed them. I grew up thinking money was everything, that if you didn't have it, you weren't trying hard enough. My parents drilled that into me. Every decision I've made, every fear I've carried, it all came from that belief. She swallowed hard. But last night, when I saw the way you handled them, the way you stayed calm while they crumbled, I realized how wrong I was. You have more strength in silence than they've ever had in their wealth. I didn't speak. I just listened. Sometimes, silence heals more than words. Samantha continued, when your card went down on that table, it wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. You didn't humiliate them, you freed me from them. I met her gaze. No, Samantha, you freed yourself. I just gave you a glimpse of the truth. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want to be better than them. For Marcus, for myself, for our future kids. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Then start by living differently. Choose kindness over pride, presence over presentation. It's not the wealth you build that matters, it's the peace you protect. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Thank you, Evelyn, for last night, for today, for everything. Before she left, she hesitated at the door. Your son loves you more than he knows how to say. She whispered. He told me this morning he's never been prouder to be your son. That made me smile. Then maybe I've done at least one thing right. After she left, I stood by the window for a long while, watching the city lights shimmer below. Somewhere out there, Veronica and Franklin were probably still seething, blaming me for their embarrassment, maybe even plotting how to regain control. But it didn't matter. Their world was built on pretense, and pretense always cracks. Mine was built on truth, and truth doesn't shatter. I looked at the bouquet of tulips on my table. Bright, simple, alive, the kind of beauty that didn't need to be polished to be seen. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I thought about how quiet my life was, and how powerful that quiet had become. They measured me by the weight of my wallet. I measured them by the weight of their conscience. And in the end, only one of us left that dinner truly rich. Because money fades. Status fades. But dignity, once claimed, lasts forever. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need shouting or anger. It's in the calm smile of someone who's finally spoken their truth. Evelyn didn't fight with words or money, she fought with dignity. And in that quiet, she won. So remember this. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who measures you by things that fade. True power is silent. True revenge is peace. If this story touched you, tell us where you're listening from and what you would have done in Evelyn's place. And don't forget to subscribe, because here on Revenge in Silence, every story reminds us that justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers.